Hi, this is Dr. Brigham Willis, and today I'm going to talk to you about challenging the process, how to experiment, take risks, and exercise outsight to achieve change and progress in your work. So I hope you enjoy it.
All right, I guess we should start, because you guys came on time. You should be penalized for, okay, so I was asked to do, I gave this presentation, I've given it a couple of times now. And it's supposed to be very interactive, so just yell at me or throw things, a question or want me to stop. Yeah, no problem, Carl. But it's, I learned about this when I took a faculty learning community here with Howard Silverman. We had to do we were doing a lot of leadership training and that kind of thing. And it's a way to, one aspect of enhancing your leadership is this, which is called challenging the process. And that phrase comes from a leadership book called The Leadership Challenge. I don't know if anyone has read that book. It's a fantastic leadership book, and this is one of their 5 ways to enhance your leadership skills. And so that's where this comes from. And the objectives for the session will be to identify 3 ways you can experiment and take risks, not really scientific experiments, more the vernacular meaning of it, to affect positive change in your daily work. The second will be to define the concept of achieving small wins, which I think is really important. I think gets overlooked and is hard to focus on sometimes, at least for me, and how it can be applied to work. And then to identify 2 strategies to exercise outsight, which not everybody might know what that means, to promote progress. I know it's an interesting word, right? I had not heard it before. But to do that, we're going to start with an activity, which is really fun, I promise. So it's called the Marshmallow Challenge. You get 1 yard of tape, 1 yard of string, 20 pieces of uncooked spaghetti, and 1 marshmallow. It's not actually a Stay Puft marshmallow, if you recognize that reference. But that's all you get, and you have 18 minutes to build a freestanding structure. Listen to my words, freestanding structure. Stand on the table. It has to support the marshmallow on top. The winning team is the one that has the tallest structure measured from the tabletop to the surface of the marshmallow, the top surface. So you cannot suspend it from the ceiling or do all those kind of things. It has to be freestanding on its own. And the entire marshmallow has to be on top. You can't eat most of the marshmallow and put just a little bit up there, those kind of things. The highest structure at the end of the build period wins. So, excellent work. Nice try on the towers. Very impressive.
We did have 4.5 minutes.
Why we're not in engineering.
We did have 4.5 minutes to test the marshmallow.
That's true.
I thought was really good.
That was really
So it wasn't how we figured out it failed right.
So usually there's a debrief at the end. So how did it go? Did you learn anything from the process of the failure at the end?
It sounded easier than it was.
For sure, right?
First.
And one of the things that they try and teach about this is be careful of your assumptions. Most people, when they start it, they make an assumption about the marshmallow, that it's light, it's fluffy, it'll be just, you throw it on at the end, it'll be no problem, right? That's not really true, right? It actually has weight and it messes up your structure, right? So one of the things is beware of the assumptions when you're starting, right? The second big thing is that most people do what you guys weren't as bad, but doctors in particular, doctors and business people do the worst at this. They have an average. There's actually a TED talk about this. I'd encourage you to go look at it. It's a little bit long since we're behind. I'll just go over the salient points. But the 2 groups that do the worst are business people, and I've noticed physicians, and online it agrees with that. And so what most people do when they are set with this challenge is that they first talk about it for 5, sometimes even 10 minutes, trying to think of what the perfect structure will be. And then a lot of groups spend time trying to elect a CEO, trying to figure out who is in charge. And a lot of times that person is the one running it, and everyone else is kind of inhibited in their ideas, and they're just kind of throwing things in. And so those are the 2 big things. And so what group of people do you think does the best at this?
Artists.
Artists are better than business people. Kids, almost always, except for engineers. Engineers do pretty well. But children do incredibly well at this. They always have a structure. They're never at 0 like you guys were. Most doctors and business people end up at 0 because what they do, instead of trying to think, plan, come up with a perfect structure, they just start trying stuff. like immediately they take the marshmallow first, as opposed to putting the marshmallow on last, which is what most people do. They build a structure and they put it there, and then boom, nothing, no good. You have a 0, right? Kids don't do that. They take a couple pieces of spaghetti and tie them together and put the marshmallow on, and then they have a structure. Then they start adding to it and prototyping. And so the point of this is that a lot of successful process challenging and improvement and change comes from just trying things, not being inhibited, not being tied down by your assumptions, and just being free to try it. So the children's structures are quite good usually, and come out as winners a lot of the time.
And they take to the table.
That's actually, yeah.
That's take to the table.
Well, they tried that, it still didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, still. I will say that right off the bat, Tara stabbed the marshmallow with a piece of spaghetti, held it up, and it just went whoosh.
So you might have
And
done
so we knew right away that
there was some weight to it.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that's the important thing. And then kids are also good about celebrating small wins, which is one of the big things in the book. Is not, a lot of people, they get inhibited by big projects because it's too much and they want to have it perfect at the end. It's okay to be okay with a small structure. Like you guys would have won if you had a 1-inch structure,
Right. Yeah.
right? So celebrate.
At least 2 spaghetti lengths.
Right.
To be
Right, and that's an assumption, right? You think you have to have this grand thing to even be
Well,
okay.
that's
Tara, didn't I say 2 would win? You wanted to go 4?
I know, I got greedy, I
Putting
got
out
greedy.
there.
The other thing that's really fascinating about the challenge, and this is kind of a demonstration of the process that most people go through. They spend a lot of time orienting, they plan a bunch of stuff, then they build, and then at the end they put the marshmallow on and boom, nothing. Uh-oh, right? And this is what business students do. They don't take out the marshmallow until here, right? When their CEO says it's okay to put it on there. And kindergarten students just are always trying the marshmallow on there, and they're prototyping the whole time. They have no inhibition about it. So that's one of the main points about it. The other thing that's really interesting is if you attach a prize to the game, people do incredibly worse. Like their productivity and their success gets incredibly worse because they assume the other teams are making these really high things and they're going for the big thing and they're not actually just trying things and getting it done. So
But I'll also say that 18 minutes changes the game as well. Because if it's 5 minutes, then it really puts the burden on. You can't sit around talking for a while.
Right.
You just got to do and work and get it done.
that's a good point. And actually they've done this.
I actually disagree with the bottom line of the kindergarten students, because I bet they orient, plan, build, ta-da, and then have 15 minutes to play.
What they found is that they keep trying to make it higher. They take their prototype and improve it, which is interesting. And they've actually tried this with 5, 10, 20, 25 minutes, and 18 is the one that's the most successful because you're trying to make a point with this. It's not,
No, I'm saying that the 18 minutes for the adults
messes you up.
messes you up
Right.
more than 5 minutes.
Exactly, and it's part of I fall into that trap a lot of times too. If I have 6 months to do something, it's a big project. Instead of just getting into it and just trying stuff and getting some production done, you wait. It's a big project, and then you're like 2 weeks out, and you're like, oh man, that grant is due. I got to get that done, and then so it's a different process. So just getting you to challenge the way you kind of operate sometimes. It's useful for me. One of my favorite leaders is John Wooden. I don't know if everybody knows who he is. Famous UCLA basketball coach. Won 10 championships at UCLA, 7 in a row at one point. But he had a lot of. He called himself a teacher his whole time, not a coach. He always thought his biggest thing was leading and teaching, helping people be better people. But one of his biggest things, and one of his greatest quotes, was that he always said that the team that wins most games is the one that makes the most mistakes. And it's interesting because you would think perfection, and his teams were perfect. They were incredible. And his thing was that if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. And he wanted his players to be free to do things, try things, be creative. And his teams were always the most creative and the most free. He didn't even run set plays ever in basketball. He instructed them in the fundamentals and process, but then just let them loose. And he almost never called timeouts. He never did any of that stuff because he wanted his players to be as creative as they could be. And I think that's something I run into that problem all the time, where I'm worried, about is it not going to be good enough or whatever. And you self-inhibit a little bit. And if you're so defined by your role and what you should be doing, it can kind of mess you up. And that's another thing in a lot of these leadership books. They talk about not freeing yourself from fear. The best leaders are the ones who can really be yourself. So John Wooden wanted all his players and all his students he taught to just be true to yourself and not be afraid of what everyone else is going to think, that they're going to think your structure wasn't high enough or that you're not doing whatever. Warren Bennis, he wrote a book called On Becoming a Leader. It's one of the famous ones for leadership. His whole book is based on this premise that leaders are those most able to freely express themselves and their viewpoints. So you think about the inspiring leaders, their confidence is one of the most attractive features there is among people, and that's what people flock to. If people are free, expressing themselves, and really confident in their vision and what they want, it usually is good. Shame and fear of failure in everybody, I think, is one of the strongest inhibitors of new ideas and change. There's a book called Axiom. That's a really cool leadership book, too, if you read it. It has 21 axioms of things you can improve, just daily things you can do to improve your leadership skills. But one of them is called the umbrella of mercy. You do this. So it's something you can introduce into groups if you're leading a group, that if someone has an idea, and they're not sure if it's going to be a great idea or not, but to encourage people to bring their ideas out, they should say umbrella of mercy, and there's no judgment allowed around that idea. And so when you say that, you're supposed to just be able to say whatever you want freely. There's no judgment, and encourages people to be just out there with anything they have to say. And that's one of the things you want to encourage all members of the team to be unafraid to express even the craziest ideas. Like in this process, if everyone's participating, some of the worst groups are the ones with the one person in charge and everyone's just sort of inhibited. Doctors do that all the time. Some MDs are terrible at that. So experimenting and taking risks, like we talked about, is really important. Generating small wins and celebrating them. So being happy that even in a little bit, if you're writing a novel, that you wrote 500 words that day, that's fantastic. You don't worry about the fact that you didn't get the whole chapter finished. You just get that done, and then you've made progress. It just happens, and you're happy about it. And then the rapid prototyping and learning from your experience, it's really important. Like just trying things and not being afraid of the failures is important. I don't know if you go to Douglas Adams. He wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a great book. But I like this quote. He said, "Human beings who are almost unique in having the ability to learn from the experience of others are also remarkable for their apparent disinclination to do so." Right? So we all have our preconceived notions of what we think is right and all that stuff, and so having an open environment where everyone can contribute can really expand and help our success. And then again, just getting back to that same point that little things are really important. John Wooden, again, one of my favorite guys, was huge on this. He won 10 national championships, had the best basketball program. Sorry, Kentucky, but UCLA.
How did Bruin undergrad?
There you go. So Bruins are the best. But he was all about the little things and getting those things done to achieve great things in the end. One of the best stories about him is that he was the best coach, best program in the country, and he'd get the best recruits to come in. And he would spend an hour with them when they first came, showing them how to do their socks and tie their shoes. And these people are like, they're the best basketball players in the country, and and those little tiny things are what he thought led to being great on a grander scale. So the little things matter. Seeking significant change, so don't be afraid to have big dreams, right? It's okay to go for big things. And then adversity is your asset. The tape wasn't good. All those kind of challenges that in the process can actually lead to something more worthwhile because you overcome things and your outcome can actually be better. And another Wooden quote: "Things turn out best for the people who make the best of the way things turn out." Right. So a lot of attitude in there too, right? So if you can make the best of how things are going. Again, it's challenging the status quo, like the thinking outside the box. I think that's incredibly important. I think we all get stuck, and this is the way it's done, and this is the way it should be done. And I think to break that up is one of the best ways is to empower other people and allow other ideas to come in. John Wooden came up in the 30s in basketball at a time when the average final score in a game was like 30 to 15, or it was a maximum in the 30s because there was no shot clock. It was all slow down, hold the ball if you got a lead, and very boring. And he was all about that and defense, but he learned when he was coming up in Indiana from a mentor that you could do it a different way, that you could have a fast break offense, you're always pushing, you're always going for more points. And he combined that from another colleague's idea with the zone press, which is where you're constantly attacking the other team, not falling back and waiting for them to come to you. You're constantly attacking them. So he completely reversed the way basketball was played, and it was unstoppable for a long time until people sort of figured it out. But even in the 60s, UCLA started scoring in the hundreds, where mostly teams were in the 40s at that point. So it's fascinating. So I think combining ideas from different people and being open to those things is key. There's the challenge we just did. You guys did effectively. There's another book, another leadership book I like, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you guys have ever heard of that, it's a pretty good book. It's easy to read. It's short. But one of the big things that they talk about in that book is beginning with the end in mind, which is exactly what we talked about in the Marshmallow Challenge. What's the end? What are you going for? And then work back from that, right? As opposed to, putting first things first, being proactive, and working toward that goal. Another important thing is creating your own opportunities, seizing the initiative, just going for things. Like, Wooden did that. He came out to UCLA. It was a non-existent program. Put things together, and he seized the initiative. Exercising outside is basically just using outside sources to give yourself insight to promote new ideas, right? So you need the ability to go outside of yourself, outside of your little cocoon, to find ideas to improve what you're doing is critical, because none of us know what we don't know, right? You need to be open to those kind of things.
Does that mean outside to other people in your field, outside your field, outside your comfort zone?
A lot of these books talk about going completely outside the field. Some of the biggest successes are where you have people who are totally not involved in even the field you're in, looking at it and saying, well, why don't you do it this way, right? And I think that can be really valuable. Like if we're in medicine or basic science research, having someone, a layperson or someone, an engineer or someone look at your stuff, I think can be really important. Another TED Talk, which actually, I think, what time is it? 5:20, so we have 10 minutes. This one, okay, I'd encourage you to watch this also. It's about a 20-minute TED Talk. I know you guys have watched TED Talks. They're really good. This one's good. A guy named Simon Sinek is a leadership guy. But he wrote a book called Start With Why, about how great leaders inspire everyone to take action. And this is his basic premise, that you have, he calls it the golden circle, but the basic idea is that you start with the why of what you do. One of his examples, he talks about Apple, right? Apple versus Dell computer, right? No matter how you feel about Apple, they inspire a very devoted following and have been, maybe the most successful computer company in the world for the past 20 years. And why is that? And it's because everything that they do, they start with the why of it. They don't start with, hey, we make great computers, you should buy them because they're cheap and they really function well, right? That's not very inspiring, right? They start with, we are going to do transformative things to your life, right? We want to do things to make your life better. All their ads are all about, that kind of thing. This MP3 player is going to make you this incredibly happy person. It's the why. It's going to do all these things. And whether it's true or not, that's what they start with. That's their basic thing. And if you listen to Steve Jobs in all the meetings, that's what he had people think about. Like, don't think about how we're going to get there or what we're doing. Think about why we want to do it and what that's going to look like. And so you come up with, what's your purpose, right? And I think it's really, for me, this was really powerful because even in what I do, PCH with critical care for kids, if you lose the why, sometimes it's hard to progress and really want to change things or do well, because the what can get kind of tedious a lot of the time, right? I'm up all night, I'm doing this, and then you're at meetings and all this, and the what is not, we're doing, the kids are getting operations, all this stuff, but the what is not, the why is what we want to focus on, right? The why I'm doing that is to make these children's lives better and give them 70 life years of quality, happy lives. And so if you focus on that, all the other stuff falls into place, right? How can I get to that place of having a kid be healthy for 7 years, right? And any idea is okay at that point, right? And then you come up with a process, and then you get the what, which is great outcomes for your lab or your doctor or whatever like that. So, and it's more inspiring. If I in my work go and say, I want to make these kids' lives better. I want them to be healthy 70 years from now with no heart defects, right? That's a lot. Everyone can rally behind that, as opposed to what, let's just go do 10 operations this week. It's just not. So you start from the inspiring part, get people on board. You want to get rid of traumatic brain injury, right?
You got a job.
But you know what I mean? It's like
to make it a little worse. Make it worse.
Right. But that's the point. It's you want to admit, you want to create amazing doctors, right? You want to create amazing physicians. That's the why of admissions that can inspire people.
Well,
and
even
saying,
beyond that, you actually want to take it outside yourself and say, you want to supply the state with the best trained doctors. You go beyond that, that way it becomes inclusive, and then you start whittling down.
totally, exactly. And that's the thing, the inclusiveness is a great point, right? You want to get people on board, get people inspired and on board with that vision. So
Makes you hate Apple even more watching that TED Talk.
I love Apple, but I'm not kind of and then this is what you're talking about, being inclusive is the other part of the highly effective people thing is achieving public victories, right? And so that's all about synergizing with other people, getting win-wins for people, getting them on board so they're successful in their own work to achieve the win that you're going to, right? And then seeking first to understand and then to be understood, right? So you have to really understand why you're doing something. Then the last part of this that I really like is sharpening the saw, which is all outside here, which I think is critical to be a good leader. And I don't know if you guys know sharpening the saw. It's basically taking care of yourself. So family, friends, hobbies, all those things to keep yourself happy, engaged, and still liking what you do. Because you get too, we all know that, you get too into one thing, it doesn't go so well. This model I had never really heard of before I did this leadership class, and I love this for what you were talking about, being inclusive and synergizing with other people. And with the Marshmallow Challenge is getting everyone involved, because classically this is how hierarchical structures work, right? You have a leader, you have followers who do mainly what the leader says. A lot of times they're doing things so that the leader is happy, they know kind of what the leader wants them to do. You have followers who are not as empowered, they don't have all the skills of the leader, they're novices. It's a more predictable operating concept, very hierarchical. It inhibits people from wanting to do change. They don't really have a lot of incentive to make great change. The follower is much more passive, right? So they're looking for the leader to sort of guide them. Extrinsic responsibility obviously lies with the leader. This is actually taken from Air Force slide. That's what SAF, Singapore Air Force, actually. But what really works better, and I think really kind of passionate about this model now, is a dynamic followership two-way leadership process. So it's called a leader-leader model as opposed to a leader-follower. So if you can get your group or whoever you're leading to all feel like they are also a leader on equal terms with you, it's really empowering. And I think it's like, if you raise the bar to here, they're going to jump over it. So if you encourage them to become experts in what they're doing and have meaningful input in all different ways to each other, to you, and back and forth, it's much more powerful and it's much more important, especially when you're in a VUCA environment, which is variability, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So if you're in a VUCA environment where everything's kind of uncertain and changing all the time, which I think we kind of all are, even if you don't think you are, it's really important. So for soldiers, this is what they're really moving toward in sort of the new military idea, is that you have these smaller groups of soldiers who are all empowered to make their own independent decisions and be kind of experts in what they're doing. And so you have expert followers and expert leaders who feel empowered to say things, make change, be creative in an unpredictable environment. They're all hopefully networked where they feel good about interacting with each other as opposed to just going straight back to their boss. The role of the leader and the follower is actually regulated by talent and context. Like I might be the putative leader of the group, but if Tara has way more expertise than I do in whatever subject it is within the group dynamic toward the goal that we're going, she's the leader in that case, right? And I would be able to take direction from her in that arena. The extrinsic responsibility, you always have to have somebody take the heat for whether things go well or not. But the intrinsic responsibility lies with the leader and followers, and I think that's a really important point. That if you get your followers who are now leaders, they then care about the responsibility and things are going well, right? They're not just passive and waiting for things to happen. You get your members actually aligned to the core values of the mission, as opposed to just doing what they do out of duty and responsibility. And also, you have your followers as a voice of ethical conscience, so they're actually empowered to say if you're doing the right thing, if you're on the right track. So I think that model is really interesting.
One other thing on the right-hand model, which I agree with wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
In the absence of a leader, look how much more efficiently it runs.
That's a fantastic point also. You don't have to be there. And actually, a great leader creates a machine or a program that actually, at the end of it, you almost don't have to be a part of it. And that actually, I love you brought up that point, because I think that's one of the hardest things for a lot of people who get to leadership positions to let go of. They want to be necessary. They want to be the one that's always has to be involved in something. And that's, I think, the opposite of what a true leader should want. True leaders, if you look at them, the successful ones are quite humble and want their machine to go. Like John Wooden, I talked about him a lot, but that's how he was very humble. He wasn't showboating. He never tried to put himself in the middle of it. He just wanted success. He wanted things to go well. And if he could step back from that and have it just happen, that would be fantastic.
Okay, well, that was Challenging the Process. I hope you enjoyed it. If you can join us for the interactive activities the next time, that would be fantastic. Thanks for watching.